Start us off.
Yes, yep. So we're the A1 group in Bio 182 with Dr. Bledsoe. Our presentation is on the diversity and adaptations of desert plants. So the topics we're going to cover is what are desert biomes, environmental pressures, morphological adaptations, physiological adaptations, how CAM photosynthesis helps plants thrive, what drives plant diversity and convergent evolution, reproduction in desert plants, ecological and human importance, and conserving biodiversity.
Thank you, Leah. Well, first of all, my name is Carlo, and let's define what a desert biome is. A desert is characterized by an imbalance between precipitation, evaporation, and transpiration, thus leading to an arid environment. It's essentially a large geographic region that is very dry, and there is little moisture and precipitation, and has very little vegetation because of these harsh conditions. There is a desert in virtually all continents, including even in the Arctic and Antarctica, but these are called polar deserts. And fun fact, most of Arizona is a desert. Now for the meat and potatoes of this presentation, what is a desert plant? The scientific name for a desert plant is a xerophyte, spelled with an X. Xero coming from the Greek word for dry and phyte meaning plant. These plants have adopted morphologically and physiologically in order to adapt to these harsh conditions. And examples of these plants and these adaptations are going to be further discussed further along this presentation. Okay. Now, a few of the environmental pressures that have led to these adaptations that we see in desert plants in today's day and age. These desert plants have had to deal with many pressures, and these include water scarcity, having high evaporation rates in these environments, extreme temperatures, and even competition for resources with other organisms. These pressures have led to three main pressures that we see in today's day and age for the desert plants. The need to conserve water, the need to survive the intense heat, and the need to compete for the limited resources. And some of the adaptations have focused on increasing water intake, limiting water loss, and storing up water for later use.
So for the morphological adaptations, I'm going to cover three types of xerophytes. We have succulents, shrubs and trees, and angiosperms. Some of the structural characteristics that you can see in desert plants include fleshy accordion-like stems, such as in the saguaro cactus. What's interesting to note is that the saguaro cactus can draw up so much water that it can weigh between 3,200 and 4,800 pounds of water, which is amazing. Some other traits include reduced modified leaves, which typically means smaller leaves, a thick waxy cuticle, which is seen down below in the aloe plant. You'll notice there. That allows water to remain in the plant and be trapped by the waxy coating. Also, we have a combination of deep and shallow root systems. So the shallow root systems are the ones that reach far out for the different water sources. And as deep as they go, it's only about 2 feet deep. That's as far as they go. Another characteristic is the funnel shaped that you'll see in a lot of succulents, such as, again, the agave plant, as you can notice in the picture below, that the water will travel through the leaves down to the main taproot. Another trait is hairs, hair-like features, which are biologically called trichomes. So you can see here down on the bottom of the hairs on the outside of this cactus that are reflecting the heat of the sun.
Okay, so desert plants maintain homeostasis by they use something called CAM, a type of photosynthesis, and they also use their stem for storage to help hold the little amount of water that they do get. And then they also use homeostasis by adapting to the weather. So going more in depth on what I just said, plants in the desert have palisade cells on both sides of the leaf, which would be known as an isolateral mesophyll. And these palisade cells are rich in chloroplasts, and palisade cells are one of the main photosynthetic cells that contain these chloroplasts. So it's good to note that in not dry environments, normal plants will only have on one side will have their kind of palisade cells. So isolateral is if they have on both sides. In addition, these help plants absorb as much carbon dioxide as possible so that the photosynthesis can happen at a higher rate due to the gas exchange of carbon dioxide being faster and food being produced more by the many chloroplasts that they do have. It is also interesting to note that the photosynthesis does not take place in the leaves. It mostly takes place in the main body, which is where it's surrounded by a waxy substance. And photosynthesis takes place more in there because that is where they store the water. Also for the roots, they grow more outward sideways than they would more down because they want to get as much water as they can on the higher level surface of the soil. Okay, and then going more in depth on what CAM photosynthesis is a way for plants to save water by opening the stomata during the night to absorb CO2. They do this because it's not as hot and it would be during the day, they would lose a lot of amount of water through transpiration. So by closing it during the day and opening during the night, it helps them conserve the little amount of water that they can take. So during the day, the plant will close its stomata and use the CO2 will absorb the CO2 that absorbed at night will turn into malic acid. And then during the day, when the stomata is closed, the malic acid is then turned into CO2. And then to go more in like depth about this step by step. So once it hits night, the stomatas will open and they'll absorb CO2. And then that CO2 would be converted into malic acid. And then once it hits daytime, the stomatas will close. The malic acid will then be converted back into CO2. And then using the light, light reactions will happen. So the Calvin cycle will happen. And then the carbon dioxide will be turned into sugar, as well as it just becomes more nutrients for the plant.
Alrighty, so going based off of what Cody was talking about, we're going to go over the different types of C3 plants that are going to be found, and these are just some examples. So we're starting off with C3, which is going to use the Calvin cycle to produce 3 carbon molecules, hence the C3 name. And a good example of this is going to be the acacia tree. So this is basically related to like other shrubs and trees. It's found in North America and Africa, and this has a lot of antimicrobial contents to it, which really help us in medicine. Moving on, next is the C4 plants. Like Cody said, we have CO2 is fixed into 4 carbon compounds. Their stomata is also open during the day, but they're just a little bit more efficient than the previous C3 plants. So basically, the Amaranthus plant, it can be found in Australia. It's an urbanous shrub found in North and South America as well, and can be used as an anti-inflammatory substance. We do have this in a lot of our modern medicines today. Moving on to the CAM plants, they basically fix CO2 at night and they store it for during the day. This is a really good adaptation, just kind of helps their stomata to remain open at night, like previously mentioned. And a good plant for this is the agave succulent, which can also be used as a digestive aid kind of in a lot of modern foods that we see in wellness today. Moving on to what drives plant diversity, a really big component of this is going to be convergent evolution. Convergent evolution is when different species create and develop similar characteristics. And this is kind of a phenomenon that increases plant diversity, basically showing multiple evolutionary pathways to a similar ecological solution. So you will see plants in different environments in different places. An example of this is going to be your aloe plant versus agave plant. The aloe plant is found in Africa, while the agave plant is found in North and South America. They both have waxy-like coatings, similar looking, with very deep tap roots, and they both survive in the same climate, but just one is found in Africa, one is found in North America. And that is a really good example of convergent evolution. Moving on to what drives plant diversity, as well as what it does, an example of that. And we're going to go to what is important. So it's important just because it helps ecosystems stay healthy and provide other living things within its environment, just different things that help it. So with these plants, animals, microorganisms, and basically food web chains kind of all stick together within this diversity. It helps with the nutrients in the soil, supports different life cycles, and contributes overall to our climate of the world. Additionally, it plays a major role in medicine and food, and it can help improve plants to help us with better medicine. Moving on to the reproduction of desert plants. These plants just kind of really need help when it comes to reproduction since it's such a harsh climate. So first of all, we have dormancy and seed germination. So seeds will wait until the perfect time to basically germinate themselves. So seeds will remain inactive until things like rainfall happen. Moving on to embryos' life cycles, they benefit from certain episodes of precipitation. So basically, they will wait for it to just get a little bit more moist, cooler, or hotter, depending on what the seed needs to germinate itself to then sprout. And then lastly, going to seed dispersal and pollination, we have different mechanisms of dispersal, whether that's animal dispersal, and or spores. So we have things like bats and moths that will kind of take the pollination with it, different places, and pollinate other plants, as well as just self-dispersal, where the seed will expand and kind of just drift off in the wind, carried by wind and rain and different things like that.
All right, so desert plants support ecological and humanity in several ways. The first being through a food source. Prickly pear cacti are a good food source for many rodents that live in arid environments. They also provide shelter through their spines. Their spines are hard, and this provides a good shelter for Gila woodpeckers, for example. And then symbiotic relationships are also prevalent in arid environments. This comes from the picture that you see on the right. The stinging ants live in hollow thorns on acacia trees. This is symbiotic because the stinging ants will prevent herbivores from eating the acacia trees, and then they get a habitat through the thorns on the acacia tree. And then desert plants also support humanity through cultural usage and medicine. Arid environments have housed Native American tribes for hundreds and hundreds of years, and cacti have been used by Native American populations in ceremonies such as rain-bringing ceremonies. They use saguaro cactuses in that. And then medicinally, Native American populations also relied on desert plants to be boiled and put into trees to treat symptoms of colds such as cough, headache, and sore throat. And then the conserving biodiversity in desert plants is important because desert plants help protect against wind and water erosion in arid environments. Due to the loose sand and loose dirt, dry environments, it's very easy for wind to come and pick up that fertilized topsoil. Whenever plants are existent and whenever cactus, trees, bushes, shrubs, plants like that, whenever they're in an environment, they will hold using their roots the top fertile soil. They'll hold it down. And then water conservation is important because the majority of desert plants, due to the lack of rainfall, have unique root systems, and they allow for water conservation within the stem. This is also an example of how desert plants can provide water to animals that also live in arid conditions. The picture on the slide shows a camel. A camel eats succulents, which have thick, fleshy leaves that store water. So whenever a camel eats a succulent, they not only gain nutrition from the plant, but they also get a water resource that they have mechanisms to hold for months at a time. So this is just a recap of what we went over in this slideshow. Again, Carlo went over what are desert biomes and environmental pressures. Aaliyah covered morphological adaptations. Cody covered physiological adaptations and how CAM photosynthesis helps plants thrive. Abby went over how CAM photosynthesis helps plants thrive, what drives plant diversity and convergent evolution and reproduction in desert plants. And then I, Ryan Beaumont, went over ecological and human importance, as well as conserving biodiversity. And then these remaining slides show all of our resources that we use throughout the project.
Thank you, Dr. Bledsoe.